I'm Chelsea, and welcome to This is Hard to Say. I'm here to talk about topics that are hard to say, which was originally birthed in 2020 from my lifelong eating disorder. I would love to educate people on disordered eating and also create a platform for us to talk about hard things like trauma, childhood, even simple interactions in our day-to-day life, joy, art. So this really is for all humans. And with that, we'll get going. Hello, and welcome back. This is hard to say is my alchemy. I am still alchemizing. I don't even fully understand alchemy, but I'm trying to. Today I wanted to talk a little bit more about the history of my own story, my own journey with an eating disorder. If you go back to my first little short podcast, my pilot, it goes over my hospitalization in 2020 with an eating disorder. I touch a little bit on my recovery, and now here we are in 2023. I think I'm pretty much there. I mean, it's a lifelong journey to undo 27 years of an eating disorder, but I'm doing pretty good. And I think now it just comes down to the heavy moments of life. So when a lot gets backed up, emotionally, stress, when I'm strapped, heartache, all that stuff kind of contributes to the triggering of the eating disorder. But I have so much more awareness and understanding and just a better mindset to where I now know what I can do to not slip. This is a little bit of a heavier episode. I'm going to go into a little childhood stuff. So just this little disclaimer. I also want to just make the disclaimer that this project is a personal collection of my own research, my experience, my events. It should not be considered therapy, medical care, or medical advice. When I was 7, my dad had passed away. He had been struggling with cancer since I was about 4, at least that we knew of. I don't know how sick he was prior to that before actually making the decision to find out what was wrong, but he had colon cancer or stomach cancer. It was kind of a mix of both, really, but he passed away when I was 7, and my mom had a hard life. I want to be clear that I don't have a relationship with her. I have already grieved her and said goodbye to her. She's still alive. But she was the kind of person that never took responsibility over her life. You know, things happened to her. Things were hard on her. Things were done to her. This very victim mentality. So when my dad passed away, that was kind of a tipping point. It was like the cherry on top for all these other things that had happened. And my dad was amazing. Had a great relationship with him for the 7 years that we had together. My mom was in the depths of despair when that happened, and we had to make a lot of changes when my dad passed. And I don't actually really remember her prior to him passing, which is wild to think about, but it's just the reality of my childhood. I think I was kind of shielded and kept from her, and I have little, snippets of her, but I remember my dad. So we sold the house, we moved into this triplex. I'm from Huntington Beach, California, so OC. So we moved into this little triplex. Really, at this time, Huntington Beach was all these little beach shacks, and it was kind of rough around the edges and just very different than it is now. Not a lot of condos, not a lot of those big, huge beachfront properties that they have now. And it was the era where if it was 4th of July, you weren't allowed to leave your house, or else they'd put you in the drunk bus and drop you off. It was just different times. So my mom was involved with some people that weren't great. A lot of shady people coming over to the house. She wasn't sober a lot of the time. Now I have the sense to say, yeah, she wasn't handling it well. She wasn't. I was mad at her for many years, but I'm not mad anymore. And I remember, I think I was 8 at this point, and it was morning on like a Saturday. And I spent my life playing at the beach. We lived on 8th and Walnut, which was 8 blocks north of Main Street in Huntington and literally 1 block away from PCH, and right on the PCH was the beach. So I spent my days just in the ocean and at the beach. My mom had made blueberry muffins that morning, and I think she was in the bathroom showering, I forget, but she was like tied up for a while and I was starving. It was pretty common to have like snacks and I guess like frozen food in the house, but not actually meals or things prepared. Like I don't remember eating meals as a child. I'm sure it happened, but it wasn't really a thing in our house. I wasn't really fed. I was also an athlete, so it was just this combination. And I knocked on the bathroom door and I said, "Hey mom, can I have a muffin?" And I swear I thought I heard her say, "Sure, have as many as you want." And so I was like, cool, I'm gonna eat some blueberry muffins. So I went into the kitchen and I think I had 2 or 3, maybe max. I mean, they weren't huge. I was a hungry 8-year-old, like probably hadn't eaten anything that day. It was probably mid-morning and I was like headed to the beach. Or I forget what we were doing. I had some muffins. And she got out and she was just so angry at me. I mean, it was like the kind of anger where you're like, whoa, I did not burn your house down. Take a breath type of anger. Because I had more than 1 muffin. The anger was, I just remember being like, oh, wow. Like my mom was angry a lot and I don't have many positive experiences or memories of like her not being angry. She was mad. And the rest of the day, she didn't let me eat anything but sweets. So she made sure that every time I was hungry, she was feeding me more sugar. You know, I remember we went to the gas station and she got one of those, like, I don't even think they sell these anymore. And if they do, I haven't seen them for a while, but they were like those apple pies, you know, kind of hand size. You know, I remember her giving me that and just all this junk food for the day. By the end of the day, I felt so sick. And I'm 8. At that, I don't know what's going on. I'm just like, you know, a kid at the time. And when you're 8, yeah, you want sugar, like it's good. So I ate all this stuff and we're home and I started to get so ill. Like I just remember throwing up so many times. And my mom saying, "That's what you get." And I obviously didn't probably make the connection like I do now at that point, what had really happened. But that was her way of punishing me for that 2 extra blueberry muffins I had that morning that she was so angry at me about. So that leads me into saying that I grew up being punished by food. That was like really the start of having an eating disorder for me. I also grew up with sports and the gym being my babysitter. So I was an athlete. I played every sport. Like each season I was in something because, you know, my mom was either working or doing something and really just didn't want to deal with me. I was a burden at this point. I mean, from the moment my dad was out of our lives, I was a burden. Another thing about being an athlete is that, and I'm on a summer team and I'm playing 5 games in a day. It's like you eat after game 2 and it's like a sandwich that you like shove down really quick and then go out and run again. So I also had that side of eating disorders. Just being an athlete and being in those situations and those settings and like those team environments, like eating disorders are prevalent. I just remember being a kid and going to school with no money and no lunch and looking at everyone else around me with food and being like, wow, I'm hungry. I wish I had what they had. And then, you know, school gets out. I still don't have money and I still don't have food and I'm going to practice and then I'm going to the gym. Because it was never just practice or just the gym. It was always I was going to practice and then I was going to the gym and then I'd get picked up at like 7 or 8 at night. So that was like a huge part of my childhood and growing up that affected my relationship with food and my body. And I started to believe and think that when I fed my body, I would throw it up. And I was not bulimic. I did not like puking. I'm just gonna be straight about that right now. That was not my direction. Because I had the punishment from food, I started to think it was poison for me. It was like innately in my cells. And then on top of that, my mom would constantly talk about how all these things that caused cancer, right? Because my dad had cancer. So it was like, he ate too much McDonald's. He had red meat. He had coffee. He ate all these things that caused cancer. And I remember she had books, even cookbooks that were around eating in an alchemized fashion, or I forget what it was, but it was like eating seaweed, basically. Like you're eating seaweed and like some vegetables, but you're not touching meat. I mean, I remember my mom just drilling it into me like, you cannot have meat. It will kill you. So I just had all of this stuff in me. What do I believe? And you know, when you're a kid, you believe your parents, no matter how hard they make your life. I didn't really grow up on protein or proper fat or even meals, really. It's like every now and then I'd have like a huge 12-inch sub from Subway because I was I was playing sports all day. It was just a really messy relationship with food from a very early age. You know, you get in high school and then everybody is obsessing over how they look, and that started to play a part, and I was also still an athlete, and so that was part of it. I'm gonna jump forwards. That was kind of the basis, the platform that all of this grew from. I'm gonna jump to when I was about 18 to 21 years old. Well, so I was kicked out of my house when I was a teenager. I was like already working a job, living with a friend. Then when I was 18, I got a job at Trader Joe's, which was great. I mean, that was like a life-saving position to have. I was their artist. I was hired to do their murals and their signs, their end boards, their chalkboards, their like little signs for each item. It was amazing. And I worked the morning shift because I also had taken my sketchbook to a tattoo shop, and I was like, hey, I want to be a tattoo artist. And so I got an apprenticeship. And the way my schedule would allow for my apprenticeship is if I would work at Trader Joe's in the morning and then go to the tattoo shop in the afternoon. I would get to work at like, I don't know, 5 a.m. The way I learned to deal with any form of stress was exercise and obviously controlling food. I was going to a gym and thinking back, I'm like, oh yeah, the trainer had a crush on me because he was like, let me train you and you don't have to pay me. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And I was like pretty stressed, you know, working full time at Trader Joe's, apprenticeship, like, I don't know, few days a week. Then this was like, you know, 2002. The tattoo shops and the tattoo industry has come a long way since then. But when I was in it, there's a lot of harassment going on. Like women weren't as invited. I just had stress, you know, trying to figure out my place in the world, trying to become this artist, and Trader Joe's was my paycheck. I wanted to be tattooing and like leave Trader Joe's so I could just tattoo. And the way I dealt with it was like exercise. And so I started working with this trainer, and he was like, okay, well, we're gonna have you on 2 sessions at the gym a day, and then we're gonna restrict you to 1,200 calories a day and no more. And this is what it's gonna be like for 5 days. And then on the weekends, if you really need to, you can like have one meal that's whatever you want. I was living by myself in this cool apartment outside of Seattle. Oh, I was in Washington, up in the Pacific Northwest. I had like a great friend group, all this stuff. I don't even know how I hung out with my friends, honestly, because I was so busy. I just remember going to work at Trader Joe's in the morning and being absolutely famished, just so starving. As most of you know, you can like put down 1,200 calories in one meal. Eat a burger, some fries, have a Coke, whatever it is, there's your 1,200 calories. So I was just like counting everything, and I just remember telling him like, I'm so hungry, I am absolutely struggling to get through my Trader Joe's job. And he was like, well, you can start adding in these little protein bars that were 100 calories or something, which I'm just gonna tell you right now, those don't do anything, and those are not a meal replacement. I'm dying and I started to get these crazy bloody noses. I'm talking pour out of my face, get dizzy, and pass out kind of bloody noses, like really bad. My boss at Trader Joe's, so Trader Joe's is an amazing company, and they've definitely become more corporate, but back then it was very family setting. People looked out for you, they cared about you. I had one of my bloody noses at work, and my boss was like, you know, you have insurance, like stay on the clock, just go to the doctor, just have them check your nose, like you're good. So I went to the doctor. They didn't ask me anything. They were just like, we're just gonna cauterize your nose. So they burned my nose, so it didn't bleed anymore. Didn't ask any questions, didn't find out why I could be passing out and having these bloody noses that were like literally making me dizzy. I got my nose cauterized, but the other stuff didn't go away. I'm still getting dizzy. I was still like passing out and fainting. I've always been kind of low blood pressure, but I was like fainting. And I was still like going to the gym. The trainer was having me, run. I was a runner. I mean, running was something I loved. It was actually one of my therapies of how I actually like survived my childhood. But I would easily run 6 miles a day. Didn't even question it. Oh, I'm just gonna run 6 miles. I'll be back in like 30, 45. Go run and come back. And then he would have me do this whole routine at the gym. And then I just remember one time, it was like Easter or something. So like all the Easter candy was just a freaking bunny Easter explosion when you walk into any store. It was a weekend, so I was, quote unquote off. I just bought so much candy. I mean, when you're restricting, you will easily binge. You avoid going to social events and to going to things where there's food because you can't control yourself when you're actually faced with it. So I bought all this candy, ate a bunch of it, and was like sick from it. I had repeated my childhood all over again. And I remember telling the trainer, now I need to work out extra tomorrow and I can't actually take Sunday off. He straight up said, yeah, okay, cool. I'll meet you at the gym. You do need to work out. Let's get rid of those calories. Who was that person? I don't even relate or connect to that person I was then. I mean, it's just shocking to think that was what was going on. And I remember, whenever I was getting ready in the morning, looking at my body, and I fully remember seeing my bones. Like my stomach was starting to go back towards my spine. It was just caving in. Not to mention how many calories was I burning just working. We burn a lot of calories just sitting upright. It's just mind-blowing. So anyways, that's a little bit more. I really wanted to talk about the history and where this stuff stems from for me, because I think a lot of people can relate to this diet culture and this exercise culture of restriction. I still to this day on social media will go on and see someone sharing, if you want to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. I don't know. I can't get down with that anymore. I just can't. I don't think that's the only way. Sure, I think some people want to lose weight and they can do it healthily and they don't have to be in a calorie deficit. They can change some habits. Nothing could make me tell someone you should eat 1,200 calories a day, especially as a woman. You know anything about your hormones and even having a menstrual cycle. I don't think I had my period for probably 15 years. And if I did, it was random, sporadic, and terrible. That's a sign. That's not okay. Your hormones should be working, which that caused a lot of damage in my adult life. When my whole late 20s, I was still in this eating disorder. I'm 39 now. So I was 37 when I was hospitalized. It's a long time to be in an eating disorder. So in my late 20s, I had such a hormonal imbalance that I was having ovarian cysts that as a woman, you are always going to have a cyst grow in your cycle, but then it releases nice and gently. And that's just the cycle. But mine were hanging on and they were growing to the size of my fist and then bursting. Within the span of 3 years, I think I had to go to the ER probably 10 or 12 times just to make sure that my ovary wasn't twisting because I had one burst. That's a hormone imbalance. And food directly relates to your hormones. I've learned that eating every 3 to 4 hours, fat, carbs, protein, has been my best move ever in life. For my brain, for the way I feel, for my hormones. It's crazy. Sharing a little bit of that history and where this started, we live in a society where all of this stuff is celebrated. We're celebrated for being skinny. We're celebrated for looking skinny. I mean, I still have people tell me now, oh, you look good. You look like you lost weight. You look like you're getting in shape. I mean, I think it's great. It feels good to hear someone say you look good. But there's other things you could be saying. And I don't think we're educated enough on certain sayings that we say to people casually who could have an eating disorder that actually feeds that mentality. I know I used to live for that stuff. Okay, are people noticing how skinny I am? I'm not fed. I must look good. And it's this terrible spiral in your head to look this certain way. And even though, like I said in my previous episode, that body image is still separate from eating disorder. I also want to say that all bodies could be struggling with disordered eating. You know, someone who doesn't look like skin and bones could have a very real problem with food. The way we look is not a good judge of what we have going on. And it's that same old saying, don't judge a book by its cover, because you just never know what's going on the inside. Yeah, I went many years with an eating disorder. As life kind of goes through waves and valleys and peaks, and so do eating disorders. I went through periods of time where I felt okay and thought I was doing good, and then I went through periods of time where I didn't. I will say these last 3 years going through recovery has taken every ounce of my intention to make sure that I eat. I do eat animal products. I do eat red meat. I even used veganism as a cover-up for my eating disorder for years. I mean, that's an easy cover-up, right? Oh yeah, no, I'm vegan. Didn't eat pasta, but I ate veggies. You will never, ever see me with a plate of veggies only here, now, ever. Like, it's just never gonna happen for multiple reasons. I'm not a hater of veggies at all, and I love them, but they're actually hard to digest. And then you have some veggies that actually, when you cut them, they release a chemical. And so then you're trying to digest that, which makes it even harder. Like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, those are good examples. I love those vegetables, but I don't love them to the point of like eating them every day or at every meal. I used to make just a pile of veggies, salad, saute some Brussels sprouts. I never used butter because butter equaled fat. I would use water. At my peaks of being in an eating disorder, it was just full blown, how much can I not eat? I would look up on my phone, okay, how many calories is broccoli? So I would just pile up this bowl of like veggies, hardly use any dressing or none at all, and eat all of it. Feel terrible because that's just an overdose of veggies, which is your body just freaks out. It's too much. You don't have like the fat, carb, and protein to actually process all of it and take in the nutrients. Now my brain knows better and I embody it. The embodiment of recovery is the power move. You can go through recovery and then live in quasi recovery for a long time, where you're kind of weaving in and out still, and you're thinking about calories, you're still thinking about the obsession is still happening in your brain. Or you can embody it. I want to heal. I want to get better. I want to go to parties and eat weird food and not care. I want to go take myself out to a restaurant and order a big ass plate of ribs and not question, and then order dessert and be stoked and not exercise the next day. Like that's the life I want to live. And I love exercising. I still exercise, but I don't over exercise anymore. It's so freeing to eat food and to not think about it all the time. When I was in my eating disorder, called ED brain, eating disorder brain. So does Chloe, my coach. It's kind of where I got it from. But when you're in ED brain, you're so deficient and scarce that all you think about is food. You can't think about anything else. You might think about something, but you come back to food. Like my kitchen was always stocked. It was always stocked, but I wasn't touching it. My fridge was stocked. I wasted a lot of food. I would make food to try it, but then toss it. I mean, it was like, it's crazy the level of sickness and illness that happens within that state of mind. You can cover up an eating disorder with all kinds of things. Like I even went through a phase where I was vegan at this point, I did raw. I did, can't have gluten, can't have any flour, can't have sugar. Oh, I'm allergic to chocolate actually. I mean, the list just goes on. I love coffee and I would be like, well, I can't have creamer, like dairy just like does me wrong. Nah, I'm good on the oat milk and all that stuff also. Now, I mean, I have a shellfish allergy. That's very real. I need an EpiPen. But like outside of that, it's like, give me the food. The hardest part for me to get over and embody and trust my body, is the lingering effect of my mom punishing me with food. I will say that is still a struggle. I'm still trying to believe that food isn't going to make me sick. I mean, sometimes it does. That's just part of it. Like we get food poisoning sometimes. That was such a violent way to be punished that there's still residue. I'm still working through that. Actually, shortly after I got out of the hospital, I had a really great doctor at the time. Not the hospital doctor, but my just, basic doctor. And I was talking to her on the phone and she was like, "So yeah, you have an eating disorder. So why don't we take some steps?" And I said, "Okay." And so she set up so that I was having my blood drawn. I think it was every week for a while. And then we went down just every 2 weeks and then every month. And that was just to make sure my levels were okay because I had been so imbalanced and so depleted. And she sent me to a nutritionist who I still see today. And she is amazing. I will link her contact at the bottom of this podcast because she is a great resource. And so I started seeing this nutritionist and she then was like, "Okay, I'm setting you up with a therapist." I've been to therapy for years, but I just happened to not have a therapist at this time. And I was kind of at a point where I didn't have the energy to work the amount I needed to actually pay for all that extra stuff in life. At this time, I was just getting my bearings and I was struggling to feed myself. So everything else was second. So Christina, my nutritionist, was like, "Chelsea, I'm setting up therapy for you. I'll call you. We're going to make sure your insurance covers it." And they set me up with a neurofeedback therapist. I didn't realize the impact that neurofeedback would have on my life because eating disorders they're classified as a mental illness, and neurofeedback deals directly with your brain. My therapist was also a very powerful hypnotherapist, and he has a Jungian background. And so I started seeing him twice a week, and it was 2 hours a week. I started going to neurofeedback. It's also referred to as biofeedback. They basically connect your brain up and they look at a computer and they read your brain waves. And then while you're hooked up, you look at a screen with a game or a movie or just something, pictures, and there's tones and visuals that give your brain feedback. So they tell the waves, we're going to give you an inhibit, right? We don't want this brainwave to go lower than this or higher than this. And the game is going to give that feedback so that you stay within that range. I had no idea how powerful that was going to be for me moving forward. I had residue of depression, anxiety, social anxiety. I had complete backwards thinking around eating. Between that, I just felt so supported. I'm lucky. I'm very lucky. Not everybody has that ability to get those resources. And so I had my doctor advocating for me. I would call her with anything and she'd be like, "Yeah, we got you. We're going to do it." I had my nutritionist, I had my therapist, and then I was paying for the ED recovery. I got very lucky. I think people in that position don't know where to turn a lot of the time. And help can be expensive. There are resources out there. There's quite a few resources and there's a lot of help out there. Just check on your friends. Check on the people in your life. Check on yourself. I don't exactly know what to say to someone who I see struggling, even after coming out of it, because if someone had said something to me when I was deep in it, I would have, you're just in denial. I had people say things to me and I just brushed it off. But that doesn't stop me from saying something. If one of my close friends, if I started seeing stuff, I think I would still say something. I do think I want to do a podcast episode with another person, just talking about what that looks like. How do we talk to people about this? How do we talk to people in our lives that we see are struggling? Since I've launched This Is Hard to Say, I've had people reach out to me and write me just letters and letters on, "Oh my gosh, my friend is going through this." All people struggle with this. It's not just women. It's not just men. It's people who are transitioning, people who are non-binary, people of color, everybody. Eating disorders don't have boundaries for who they affect. There's no bounds. I'd love to get someone on here and discuss what are things we can say to the people in our lives. How can we make sure that we at least tried? Because you can't always change someone's mind who's in denial, but you can at least try. And I have a Connect page where you can actually write me. I'd love to hear your story if you've gone through this or if you know someone who has. I am going to be making a public page for community letters, people who want to share their story, their experience. It can remain anonymous or you can have your name on there. But rate me, connect. I want to hear, I want to say hi. I want to know how this affected you. I want to know what you learned. I also have statistics on my website, lots of letters, my own letters, resources, and a place to support this project. This is my alchemy. I'm going to continue to alchemize it with sharing. Thank you for being here. You can find me on Instagram and the web. Instagram is @thisishardtosay with a period between each word. The website is www.thisishardtosay.me. My more personal and graphic design account is @ChelseaWillett_designs. Those will also be in the show notes below. If you want to support this project and podcast, there's a few ways to do so. You can head to my website, click the support button in the top right of the navigation, and that will lead you to how to help. You can also submit your own story anonymously, or you can share who you are. If this podcast spoke to you, it would be so appreciated to subscribe, leave a review, click some stars, and share it with your people. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.